Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. It's raining again in Buffalo. Oh, my God. It just won't stop.
It's sunny here in Jersey.
Well, wonderful. It's still better to live in Buffalo. We'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Okay, so for all the pre-show haters, here's a hockey pre-show. I looked it up because I felt like since the start of the season, we've had an inordinate amount of injuries. And so I looked at
which we're going to talk about at the beginning of the show.
Well, it's okay. I'm still good. I'll bring this up and then we'll have bigger discussion later. So I looked up how many players are on IR, LTIR, and it's 67 roughly. And then I took out like the chronic ones, like the Carey Prices and such, and I figured that's about 60. Just so you know, and this is where I think they should have had really big discussions yesterday at the Board of Governors. Right now, that's $7,900,000 in cash, thanks to Sport Track. They actually clocked that. So that, you could say whatever you want. I know to fans, LTIR is this magical way for your team to lose money, to get rid of money. But like Kevin always points out, it's still being paid. And
right.
That's almost $8 million already in the season that's being paid by various teams. That's a lot of money. I think the shortening of preseason was a bad idea. I do.
I will point out that somewhere on Twitter they've showed that there were more people on the IR last year at this time than now. Somewhere, yeah, it's actually down 9% or something.
Really? Okay,
yeah.
It doesn't seem like it to me.
I don't know whether the numbers were good or somebody was making them up. I'm just telling you that's what
you gotta admit, even if it isn't, that's a lot of money on the IR already.
Yeah, no, you're right for sure.
Yeah, but
it is being paid.
Part of it, Russ, is everybody is so tight against. I'm not disputing that some of these players are actually hurt, but everybody is tight up against the cap because they expected the cap to go up higher.
Sure.
And I think, when in doubt, put the guy in LTIR. I mean, I'm not saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a few of those, but like Connor Brown's a young guy. They didn't want to put him on LTIR. Aaron Ekblad is back on LTIR. Like, there's some real good players on LTIR.
Okay, you're blowing the first 10 minutes of our show, but
whatever.
Well, we're still going to cover it.
Yes.
I just have to say this because I was intently watching Game 5 of the Cleveland Yankees series yesterday, and Kev, I'm a traditionalist. I'm an old fogey when it comes to baseball. When Josh Naylor does the "Who's Your Daddy" rocking the cradle as he's running around the bases in Game 4. Oh,
Ken doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
No, I didn't even realize that's what it was. That was the "Who's Your Daddy" thing. Because really, like when Pedro said it, he just said it. I didn't even understand what it was, but I just thought it was dumb.
It was completely dumb.
Yeah.
Especially in a series where you're the underdog, you're up. The last thing you want to do when you're up 2-1 and you're trailing in Game 4 and you hit a home run, yeah, you pump your fists, get your team going, sure. Rocking the cradle and saying "Who's your daddy" as you're running around the bases is the ultimate in stupidity. Now, Kev, if we're talking about the 70s or the 80s, he gets one in his ear. Not anymore. Yeah. That's not baseball anymore.
People worry about it. Yeah, I mean, I see your point, but you got more things to worry about than what the other
and see
doing.
Down the line, I'd say next year, if the Yankees face Cleveland and it's an 8-1 game, he's going to get one in his ear or get one in his back. But what nowadays the response,
which is ridiculous, which couldn't be more ridiculous.
Right,
that's ridiculous.
But the response,
we're not 12.
The response from the Yankees here was to respond in kind. And after Gleyber Torres catches the ball for a force to end the series, he looks right at the Cleveland dugout and does "Who's your daddy now?" which I thought was perfect. You're not going to bean a guy when it could be a difference maker in the series. Maybe they won't do it next year. Maybe this is enough of a response. But I thought that was perfect.
I'll tell you what my dad would say if I showed him all that. He'd be like, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Like, that doesn't.
Yeah,
the Yankees is just stooping to the same level. Like, why would you do that?
I mean, I saw a guy on Twitter that I thought summed it up. He said 18% of the people in the world are going to be just incensed about it, and the rest of us are going to say, "Who the hell cares?"
Right.
You're watching the game.
Yep.
It's about who wins the series. It's all that.
But to your point, Russ, I mean, I think there has to be a response. Okay, so
why does that? Matter of fact, I would
why
tell
does
my
there have to
team
be a response?
because
don't
he's showing
stoop to
up.
their level. Focus on your game. Let's just get to the next round. We don't need to get involved
Because
in any
he's
of it.
showing up your team. That's why.
Who cares?
Who
cares?
I think respect means something. Maybe it doesn't anymore.
That has nothing to do with respect. That's
Right.
your judgment of what respect is. So I mean, but that
As
really
a fan,
doesn't.
right? As a
No,
Yankee fan, it upset your
that's-
sensibilities.
I mean, like you said before about you were just saying about before about that was just we were just joking about it. It's the 12-year-old in me. Well, that's the 12-year-old respect when you're on the playground, and I mean, can't you outgrow that when you're making millions of dollars?
See, unfortunately, Aaron Judge is going to, and fortunately for him because he's got the talent, but unfortunately for like most other people, he's going to make $40 million playing a 12-year-old sport. It's a kid's game, and these are adults. And the thing is, when adults are playing kids' games, sometimes they stoop to the level of children, and we know that. But I maybe these games are meaningless.
Your own ace, the Yankees' own ace, Garrett Cole, said it best. They asked him about it. He said, "I thought it was dumb."
Yeah.
I saw that too. Yeah.
Right. I mean, Russ, why do you want to motivate the Yankees? They're up 3-0 in game.
It didn't even bother him. He didn't care.
He didn't care, but the rest of the team did.
No, I don't know. I bet there are about 5 guys on the team that cared.
Right.
I bet the rest of them didn't give a rat's rear end. Those things get a life of their own on Twitter, and because people bring them up on podcasts.
If you do something physically, if you physically hit a player, then I get it.
Right.
Then be mad at that. But this is nothing.
Well,
yeah, this is like they're worried about other things other than.
I will bet, Russ. I will bet you this though, and you know that I have, and we'll start after this. You know that I have not given up on my mantra when it comes to the Astros. I will bet you if the Yankees beat the Astros in this series, which I don't think they will. I think the Astros are favored. I think the Astros will win. But if the Yankees beat them, somebody on the Yankees is going to point to the Astros locker room and do this in terms of the buzzer.
Okay, but at this point, like,
and you and 17% of the other people will think that's awesome.
Right.
I love it.
I don't know what to say about it. I mean, you just concern yourselves with things that, the majority of people do not concern themselves with. They're trying to worry about winning the series and who's pitching, and that's the joy for them. And you're worried about some adolescent view of respect. So I think his respect is who wins the series. So
okay, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, October 19th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and I have the hiccups, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Unfortunately, Russ started off with what I was going to start the show with, but we're going to go more in depth on the slew of injuries. And let's talk about the 2 big ones, because, Kevin, when we looked at and we previewed the Florida Panthers, the area that we were worried about in terms of depth on that team was defense. And said Aaron Ekblad's got to stay healthy. And Aaron Ekblad in his career, he's a great player. He's got a lot of talent, but he's had knee injuries, he's had other injuries, and now he is on the IR again, actually on the LTIR again. And it sounds like it's not a season-ending injury, but it sounds like a lengthy injury for him, and that's big for the Panthers.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I don't know whether the injuries are up or down and all that, but it's a significant player. So that's the deal that everybody's kind of talking about. And, the Red Wings here in Detroit lost Tyler Bertuzzi. And, there are other guys around the league, even before the season, the Carolina Hurricanes, who to me, have been the best team in the first week. They started out without
giving up a goal a game, so they have to be.
Yeah, exactly. Max Pacioretty before the season even started. So there's been a lot of significant injuries, but I don't know if you're going to find one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but more important than Ekblad is to the Panthers. Like that's a massive loss to them. They're not above average as a defensive team, even with him. So,
Russ,
I don't know. That's a tough.
Russ, I found it laughable. I was listening to Jeff Merrick's show, and he talks about Ekblad, and then in the next sentence he says, well, Brandon Montour is going to have to step. I mean, when Brandon Montour is your number one defense, and nothing against
he's not playing tonight either against the Flyers.
Right, but when Brandon Montour's got to step up, so your number one defenseman right now is Gustav Forsling with Radko Gudas. I mean, they don't have Uyghur anymore.
No.
I mean, yes, you can rely on the fact that Paul Maurice, I think, coaches a better defensive system. But this was not a defensive team last year. They were basically Toronto Maple Leafs South in terms of being more offensive minded and concerning themselves less about defense. I actually think Toronto was better defensively than Florida was. But I mean, with the loss of Ekblad, if it's 2-3 months, they're in trouble. This is troubling.
No question. I mean, it is something we talked about. They probably still could make the playoffs, but they'll struggle. Like their goaltending will have to step up, and other players will have to step up. It's like a lot of other teams. Like there are huge names that you're going to mention, and you know what? All those teams have to just kind of soldier on. There's nothing you can do.
The other part of all that too is, over the weekend, the Florida Panthers, who are playing with only 20 players, everyone carries a roster of 23, but they're one of 9 teams who have less than $250,000 in cap space. Mm-hmm. And they're nickel and diming, and to the point, they're not even carrying 23 players. They're carrying 20. So when Montour was injured, they had to play with 5 defensemen the other night because they really didn't have room to call anybody up. And they're going to be
they'll be able to have more on the roster. They just won't be great players.
That's exactly right. But there are going to be other teams that are going to be facing similar situations because $250,000 is not enough. Because you got to reach a certain threshold to put a player on long-term IR, and most of the time you don't hit that. It's they're going to be out 10 days or whatever. So if they get any significant injuries, these 9 teams, they're going to be dealing with this as well, which leapfrogs into the other big story today, which everybody in the league's talking about, is Gary Bettman saying we might go up $4 million after this season for a salary cap. So that could really be a significant jump.
Yeah, call me skeptical, Kev. I think it will go up, but I think it's going to end up going up like $2 million. But even if it goes up 4, Mike and I were looking up some teams. I looked up the Flyers. We looked up the Leafs. $4 million doesn't get him out of cap trouble for next year.
No, but it is significant. And let me just use the team that I deal with, the Red Wings. That's essentially the increase that both Bertuzzi and Larkin will get. Right. So that for them, there's the money that they're going to need, and now they'll be able to, use their other money for other spots. So, I mean, your point is well taken, Russ. I mean, it's not $8 million or it's not $10 million, but
right.
$4 million, especially the way it's been going. But the lead that's buried in all that is the revenue last year was $5.4 billion. $5.4 billion, which is really remarkable when you consider where the NHL was 20 years ago.
And I think the most optimistic sign, I'll jump back to the injuries in a minute here, but the most optimistic sign about the comments that Bettman made at the Board of Governors meeting was the fact that they will pay off the escrow differential by the end of the year, which means, yes, the cap will go up more than the $1 million that they projected, but there's going to be a large upshoot in the cap probably for 24-25, which I know for the team that I cover and for other teams, I mean, the Leafs need the Leafs are fairly clean after next season on a number of contracts, but they need that increase to pay Austin Matthews. And, Austin Matthews is making $11.6 million. If you're going to pay him $13-14 million, that's only $1 million or $1.5 million to $2 million more per year, or maybe a little more. But every dollar counts, especially with a team right now that was $4 underneath the cap before the Matt Murray went on LTIR, and then they could call up 2 or 3 players for a Western Road Swing. They were going to have to go on the Western Road Swing with 20 players because they were that tight against the cap. And they're not alone. It's not mismanagement on the part of Kyle Dubas. That's Tampa, that's Vegas, that's Toronto. There's a number of teams that are in that situation, Kev. So
there's 9 of them, but it still is managerial mismanagement. And
it is. I mean, that's the only way you got there is by mismanagement.
Like everybody knows what the situation is, but they still push it. They could just say, we're not going to get that extra guy. I mean, Toronto could have made the decision, not to bring in who's the guy that Ekman likes so well.
Not Collie Yarncrow. Zach Aston Reed.
Well, he was $1 million, right?
$800,000. Yeah.
Oh, he's only 800. I thought it was $1 million. I was going to say you could bring in an $800,000 guy instead of $1 million. So maybe that was a bad example, but they could have done something. They just chose not to. So
I do want to point out too something about that revenue, Kev, because it was mentioned yesterday, and I knew it had been growing. So somewhere between 37 and 40% of the NHL's fan base is female, and I think that's significant. If you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that number could get so high so quick.
To be honest with you, it was higher than that. I wrote a story about, I would say 15 or 20 years ago when they were extolling the demographics. And at that point, 40% of season ticket holders were women in the league. They had the highest by far of any sport. And I remember there was quotes about, why that was. And there was discussion about that women like the sport. The athletes are normal-sized people and not giants, and that sort of thing.
I can't remember who made the comment that I thought was a little ridiculous. That the reason women like hockey is because they think the players are cute. I mean, that's just bullshit. It's because they like the sport. Now, I'm sure there are women fans of all sports that think that the male players are attractive, just like there are male fans of female sports that think they're female players. It's not. It's the game. I know a lot of men who like hockey.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with you completely. But there, I just remember talking to, interviewing some women about that who pointed out that in the other sports you're playing without, they're abnormal sized human beings. They're 300 pounds or they're 6'10", and hockey, like baseball, is played, mostly with guys that are, 6 foot,
Right.
So that sort of thing.
It was Bissonnette that made the comment. Okay, getting back to the injuries, if Ekblad was 1A in terms of impact players, then Gabriel Landeskog was 1B. They announced that he is out 3 months with knee surgery. So they haven't specified anything more than knee surgery, but I would assume 3 months. It's not an ACL, but it's probably ligaments that he injured. And Kev, I mean, they're deep enough that they can survive 3 months without Gabriel Landeskog, but that's their captain. He's one of the best players on the team. That is going to hurt the Avalanche.
Yeah, and I was kind of struck by the oddity of the prognosis. We know from having covered for a long time, it's 4 to 6 months for an ACL, and meniscuses can be up to 6 weeks. So what is that? Is this a knee displacement injury? What was it?
They didn't specify. The only thing I can think of, because it could be a dislocated kneecap, and anything MCL or LCL, even if it's a tear, usually is 6 weeks. When you're talking 3 months, it's either a dislocated kneecap or a meniscus tear or something of that nature. Because ACL is 6 months to a year, so it's not that.
I can tell you this one from experience. When I had my kneecap shaven underneath and flipped, and that was after I already had needed knee surgery because they said, oh, it's going to be like 6 weeks, but we have to see what's going on. It added on months. It added on. All of a sudden, like my 6 weeks turned into 6 months. So it probably is something with the kneecap.
Yeah, and if it's the injury sounds like a pretty serious one, so even though he'll be back in 3 or 4 months, you don't know what level his timing will be off.
Right.
There'll be a trust. You got to figure out whether you trust the injury repair and all that. So, they're never quite the same for a year after major surgery like that.
Right. Other injuries, Connor Brown, as Russ mentioned, who is a pretty effective winger. I think he's a decent, if not top 6, top 9 guy who got traded from Ottawa to the Capitals. He is out long term with a lower body injury. So a team, Kev, who I've seen play a couple times, who did not look impressive against Toronto last week. Now Ovechkin was slow starting. Now he's got a couple goals, but the goaltending with Charlie Lindgren and Kemper, I like Kemper, but I'm always concerned about workload with him. Their defense isn't as strong, and without Backstrom, I think they're going to be on the outside looking in for the playoffs, and losing a guy like Brown, who's a contributor, I think hurts them.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I mean that Metro race is going to be tight, so an injury of this any form for any of these teams is going to play a role. And Backstrom has really been kind of underrated for most of his career. Like, people don't realize the impact he's had, and
it's almost like they don't give him credit for the hundreds and hundreds of assists he's set up for Ovechkin. He almost doesn't get credit for that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and so that that's a significant team, and you're already out of the gate. The Carolina's playing exceptional. The Rangers are pretty darn impressive too.
They're good too, no question.
I did talk to a pro scout who loves the Rangers, but says, "Man," he said, "do they give up a lot of prime scoring chances?"
Well, that's the one thing about the defense with them. Yeah, that's he's right.
Like, they're definitely. He said, I love all their defensemen. He said, there's nothing wrong with their defensemen. But he said with the system they play, they just give up. And
it's the Gallant system. It is. He wants them to pinch a lot to get offense from the blue line, and that's the downside of it.
Well, yeah, and they're doing it because they have Shesterkin.
Right, and that system has worked for him because he had Fleury in Vegas, and he depended on Fleury to save their bacon, and especially in that first season. I mean, he was superhuman. He was. And I don't know. But the thing is, Russ, I don't know how. Like, I predicted the Rangers to come out of the East. I don't know how you can think that they're going to come out of the East if at some point they don't tighten up a little bit and make it a little easier on Shesterkin.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I picked Carolina to win the Metro and to go to the Stanley Cup for that exact reason, because I feel like the Rangers are more likely to make the Patrick Kane trade than to shore up their defense, because that's sort of like the way the Rangers operate. Now, the other thing is, people have pointed out, well, a lot of times when those kinds of trades are made that first year, when you get that player, you don't generally win. No, a lot of times that's true, but if the Rangers get Patrick Kane, they're going to try and keep him for a few years too. That's always been their MO too. And if they can keep Patrick Kane for a couple of years, then maybe next year could be their year. But, I think this year they're going to be right there again. I could see them in Carolina matching up again. And this time it seems like Carolina with the Brett Burns. Yeah, I told you that was a massive addition for them, because it not only gave them like a guy who could play the position, but it gave them another like elite puck moving, still can score defenseman too, which, they still don't have a ton of. And now he fills that void.
But come on, Russ, you're picking Carolina with Freddie Anderson in goal.
No, maybe it'll be Freddie, maybe it won't be. But yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, it will be Freddie Anderson. But the defense has been so impressive. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to watch any of their games, but
I haven't seen their games yet, but I've been seeing the numbers.
Yeah, well, the numbers are great, but also, I mean, it just seems like they're everywhere in their own zone. Like, you get in there and you look, and there's a Carolina guy by every guy. Their defense just is so aggressive, and they just play so hard. Like, I've talked to some GMs that say, man, is there anyone playing more aggressive defensively than Carolina? They're just really on you all the time. And it's not even physical. It's just they're there. You're trying to find some ice, and there's a Carolina guy, always there. It's really kind of a Brendan Moore deal. So they've been very impressive. It's early. We'll see what happens. I mean, guys are going to get injured. Guys are going to step up. But I will tell you, I saw the Kings. Man, are they quick. Like, they were quick last year. They're quicker this year. They're just really, really quick. And Velarde, may finally be healthy. And he looks tremendous. Like, he was good against
for him because he is a talent. Always has
been. Very
Yeah.
talented.
That move he made in the shootout on Saros, I thought Saros was going to tear his groin. It was a fantastic move. And Cal Peterson, who, everybody, I think, expected Cal Peterson to sort of take over the number one job from Quick. And, Quick was not going to surrender that job. He's going to be dragged out kicking and screaming. But they paid Cal Peterson $5 million a year for a reason. He's a good goaltender.
Yeah, and, he made some big saves in that game. I watched some of the second and third period, and he made some big saves. I was impressed with Cal Peterson again.
Yeah, well, it was good against Detroit too. He's still acrobatic. He may be 107 years old, but he can still move around the net. And one other thing about, I don't know, maybe you guys talked about it the other day, was the Larkin goal save that
we didn't talk about it.
Well, how many times? There are many times in NFL when you talk about an NFL game that you're not necessarily talking about the winning touchdown. It was a tackle, a sack, and everything. But in hockey, we usually are talking about the goaltending or the scoring. It's one or the other. But this is the first game I can remember in a long time when people were walking out of that arena talking about the fact that Arvidsson had a wide open net, empty net goal heading in to preserve a win. And Larkin, who we all know can skate, didn't catch him, but got close enough to make a dive and sweep that puck off the stick. Now, I've seen many players dive, but usually you're sort of blocked by the guy's body or the stick, and you can't get your stick in there. Somehow he managed to snake his stick in between the stick handler and the skates and knock that puck off. And it was so stunning. I mean, even Detroit's coach said he was astounded. Like, he had already in his mind said, that was the game. He was going to score and it was over. And then there was about a minute left. And when that happened, everybody in the press box said, well, the Red Wings are going to score. They're not going to waste this. And they did. And there are good points and bad points, losers' points, but that was a good loser's point because you knew the Kings were going to beat them in overtime. And they did. But, they got a great point out of it just because Larkin made that play.
What I thought when I saw that play, and, it's in another sport, and it was a game that they lost. If you remember the Don Beebe play on Leon Lett in the Super Bowl, where Leon Lett picks up the ball, he's running to the end zone, and Don Beebe, even though they were down, I think 52-17, catches up to him and swats the ball out of his hand. Now, the Bills come back and win it, but it just showed, it was a never quit mentality. And Larkin, I think, has that reputation of being a never quit guy.
But he's also a tremendous skater. Like,
right.
Yeah.
But for us, it will be very easy to just say, oh, okay, no, just give up on it. And I bring that up to talk about a couple teams that have played badly against the lesser lights of this league, like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who played the Arizona Coyotes. And anybody who know, and I said this before, anybody who knows the history of Arizona coming to Toronto, there are these anomalies, Kev, when it comes to teams visiting certain places. San Jose won for 15, I think it was 15 or 16 years in a row when they came to Buffalo. No matter how bad or how good the Sabres were, no matter how bad or how good San Jose was, they'd come into Buffalo and they'd win. Arizona has won in Toronto The last time Toronto won in regulation was 20 years ago against the Arizona Coyotes, one of the worst franchises in the league. The Leafs do not show up for the first 50 minutes. They're down 2-0. They score 2 goals in 24 seconds, and then they end up losing the game 4-2. And people were complaining, as I complained, in terms of I thought it was the wrong call. On the Alex Kerfoot tying goal late in regulation. They said it was batted with the glove hand. But that game was lost by that team not showing up for 50 minutes and being in a position to lose to one of the 2 or 3 worst franchises and worst teams in the league. You can never not show up, even against the worst teams, Kev. And this team, I pointed out in my blog, Toronto, and I'm going to talk about Edmonton and Tampa in a second, but Toronto last year, the difference between them winning the Atlantic Division and finishing in second place was 2 games against Arizona, 3 losses to Buffalo, a loss to Montreal. These are all the worst teams in the league, and they blew 11 possible points, and that was the difference between them winning the division and losing the division. And Sheldon Keefe said, we have elite players, and the elite players didn't show up. And I'm sorry, you need your elite players to show up, even if it's against Arizona.
Yeah, no, I mean that is correct, and it's early in the season, but all the games count the same, whether they're in April or October. So, that certainly makes sense. But there's been the start of the season's been odd. It's hard to get a handle. Like, is this the beginning of the end for Tampa, or is this just they're just off to a rough start and they're trying to kind of sort it all out? But Tampa's played poorly. The Sharks, that I think some people thought were going to be a little improved. I mean, not playoff team, are going to be improved. They looked absolutely horrible. I just read an interesting story where the writer just essentially said, everybody's looking for reasons. The Sharks are just a bad team. That's the reason.
But
yeah,
I did want to say this about Toronto, Kev. I was watching, I guess, a lot of the second period, third period of that game, the rest of the game, and I did see Sheldon Keefe panic on the bench. And I think at this point, listen, Mike, he did. Everybody, I spoke to more than one person who saw the same things I did. So don't defend Sheldon Keefe here. Just let me talk.
Well, I will, but make your point first.
My basic point is this. In the 2 years that he has been there, he's going on, 3 years actually now, right?
Yeah, November 2019 was when he was.
Right. So this team still acts the same way when they're facing this kind of adversity, whether it's regular season or playoffs. And my feeling is, if Kyle Dubas is near the end, then if I were Kyle Dubas, I would not go down with the Sheldon Keefe ship here, because it's going to head down the same path. It really is. He did not evoke any kind of confidence on the bench. He could say what he wants about his regular players, and he's right. But at the end of the day, you still, as a coach, have to tweak these guys, and you have to somehow get this idea. And look, the fact is that losing is in their heads. We all know it. They know it. And the problem is, every night they're looking for 4 guys to score and then hope they get something from the rest. And it's not a winning recipe in this league.
Okay, Kev, you respond, then I have to respond.
Well, yeah. I don't know that this is a Keefe issue as much as the fact that the players themselves. I think I agree with you that it's in their heads, but I don't know coaches can. It's part of their job is to prepare their team. But what do you say? Get it out of your heads. How do you? You're not going to bench the top players.
Well, that's why maybe it may be a different guy that needs to get it out of their heads, because this guy can't.
No. See, this is the problem, Russ. This is the major disconnect. And I've been saying this for 3 years. Okay, maybe there are better coaches out there than Sheldon Keefe. Barry Trotz is a Stanley Cup winner. There are other coaches out there as well. The problem here has been bringing back the same core every single time. You needed to change it up. Kyle Dubas has gone all in on this group. And what do you expect to change if you bring back? No, they've changed the scenery. They've changed secondary players. They've changed 4th and 5th and 6th defensemen and 3rd and 4th liners, but they haven't changed. You're not going to trade Tavares. You're not going to trade Matthews. You're not going to trade Marner. Nylander's the one that I've pointed to in terms of clearing out space, allocating money in different places. You can't bring back the same group. I mean, this is not the Washington Capitals. I mean, even the Washington Capitals changed that group significantly to the point that they were able to win a Stanley Cup eventually. But they didn't bring back the same group over and over and over again.
Right, but if I'm Shanahan and I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, if both of these guys, if I'm going to fire both of these guys at the end of the season, then I might as well replace Keefe now, because I already see where this is going. I've lived through this the last couple of years. Bringing in somebody else just might change things. Otherwise, they're heading the same way.
Kev, I would be absolutely dumbfounded. I think Dubas and Keefe are tied at the hip. And if Dubas went to Shanahan and said, I need to fire Sheldon Keefe, he would tell him to pack the boxes as well. I think he's tied to Keefe, and he doesn't have another bullet in his chamber. It's either you win with him or you're both gone. I don't think that they're separately going to go.
I mean, don't you think he would give him an interim coach? I don't think that they would.
I feel that they would.
Yeah, I think he would. If he wanted to fire him, I think he could. Because usually, if Shanahan's thinking he's going to fire Dubas, he's also thinking, well, if I've got an interim coach, I can still, bring in my own coach too. So, right. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but I also don't know. I mean, how much would it change if you're going to just trade Nylander? I mean, is he actually part of the leadership group? That doesn't seem like it's thing, but
I think his attitude is symptomatic of the problems. He is an extremely talented player who shows up when he wants to show up. I think his effort, I think, bleeds through the rest of that roster. They see him turn it on and turn it off. One game now, he's leading the team in scoring right now. So it's like people can say, well, Mike, you're talking about Nylander being the problem and he's got 3 goals. I'm not saying he's not talented, but I am saying that, and that line has been good, and it's been Matthews and Marner who have sort of struggled. They struggled early last year, and then they got on a roll and everything was fine. But this is symptomatic of what happens to them and what happens to them in the regular season at certain points and in the playoffs. And the playoffs are the focus in Toronto. The regular season only matters to get in the playoffs for them. The season really starts in late April.
I don't think this year it's going to be the case, Mike. That's the whole thing with the goaltending injuries and everything else. They can't be thinking that way this year. This year is going to be a battle to get in the playoffs.
It might be more of a battle, but I still think they have enough talent. Remember, Russ, Matt Murray is not out for the year. He's out for a month.
I know. That's how it was in Ottawa too. He's out for a month. He plays for a few games. Then he's out again.
I think the greater concern is the Muzzin injury, and we just
the Muzzin injury is terrible.
That Muzzin is on. They placed him on the IR, not on the LTIR. So they haven't. I guess they haven't diagnosed. They can always put him on LTIR if it's found out it's something more serious than just a neck injury in terms of. Yeah, Tony Soprano keeps saying Khudobin to Toronto. Yeah, keep dreaming. You want to dump that $3.5 million boat anchor on any team that you can see. But come on,
it's Twitter, Mike. Calm down.
No, it's in our comments. It's in our comments. But okay,
all right. But let me just make one more thing about Nylander. Please. I mean, you're closer there. You know more about it than me. But Nylander doesn't strike me as a Pied Piper type player that people, follow him to the ends of the earth. Like the way he plays, the way you describe him playing, it seemed to me that people would be angry how he played, not, that it would be contagious and the rest of the team would play that way. I think they would react negatively to that. So I don't know. Moving like one guy, I don't think that would change.
Well,
all that much.
I think that in the offseason, had they moved him, and if you can't really do it now, I mean, it's not going to have much of an effect unless it's a money in, money out trade, like a hockey deal. But you needed to address. I mean, this team has totally no physicality whatsoever. That's the design of the GM and the coach. They believe in speed and skill and stick checking, and literally, the only guy who's been physical all year has been Muzzin, and now he's out of the lineup. They may insert Wayne Simmons into the lineup to have somebody who actually hit somebody, but they get out hit every game. And if their power play doesn't score, and if their offense is on the periphery, they just don't score. So I mean, I don't. Yeah, and somebody said Labushkin is missed in Toronto. At least he's a guy who hit. I mean, he was a 5th or 6th defenseman.
He's doing well in Buffalo.
Yeah, he had a big hit in the game last night, and that was I was going to talk about a couple other teams, and just even talk about any one of these. Buffalo goes into Edmonton, and Eric Comrie makes 46 saves against the Oilers. The Oilers have started slow. Jack Campbell did not play well in his first game against Calgary. I think they're 1-2, with a lot of expectations on their shoulders. Philadelphia goes into Tampa, Russ, and beats the Lightning.
Mm-hmm.
And Pittsburgh went into Montreal, beat the Penguins. So it's not unusual that bad teams will win over good teams, especially on the road, when the good teams take the bad teams for granted. Maybe it's an early season thing, but from my point of view, the Arizona-Toronto one was the worst of them all.
Here's what I can say about the Tampa game. The Tampa game was look, when you have a John Tortorella team, they're never going to give up. Now, the last couple of games, the Flyers have overcome deficits. They've been down 2-0 in these games to come back and win. The thing about Tampa was I had noticed about midway into the second that they definitely took their foot off the gas. And when the Flyers did catch up, then all of a sudden they weren't up to their level in the game because they had already sort of drifted off. Their defense isn't good. And I think Cooper's going to address that, but it's going to take some time. So I get it. The Flyers played a good game and won. But I feel like the next time they play Tampa, it's not going to be like this because Cooper's going to make adjustments. But the thing is, right now, their defense is bad. It's bad.
Well, here's the problem.
You guys.
But here's the problem. Where are they going? Losing Ruda, Ryan McDonough.
I know. It's hard now.
And their depth has just, it started to be chipped away at about 3 or 4 years ago. And they've chipped away to the point now where they really don't have depth. They don't really have anywhere to go other than make a trade. And, there's no available defenseman really out there. And Tampa Bay has the same salary cap issues that they've had for 3 or 4 years. So I'm a little concerned. I'm usually very bullish on Tampa Bay. They kind of got away. But this time around, when you watch them, because, they've gotten off a rocky start. Stamkos is playing out of his mind. It's all defense, but they don't really have anywhere to go. I mean, you can system it up, which I think they will do, as Russ pointed out, but I don't know if it'll be enough, because if you're going to system it up, you're going to actually have to ask Hedman not to be a rover. And then you sort of take him away from that. So, and you can't ask him to play 27 minutes a night, or he's going to be dead by game 60. You can. Yeah, I mean, there are guys that can play 25 plus, but
so here's how desperate they are. They put Nick Perbix in last night, who has 14 AHL games to his credit. That's it. He might be a 24-year-old guy, but he's not ready for the NHL, and he was playing already. And it's like that's how out of players they are. So you're right, Kev. There's only so much they can do. But the funny thing was they were doing enough to beat the Flyers for a while because they got power plays, and Stamkos scored 2 power play goals, and Point looked really good. And so for a while they were doing enough. But then when the Flyers clawed their way back, then all of a sudden it became like a defensive battle, and the Flyers, got them to cough up the puck. And that's not hard to do anymore, where a couple of years ago that would have been hard for the Tampa Bay Lightning to do. So that's where the game is at. Well,
the problem here, Kev, is that Julian Breezeball has little or no flexibility when it comes to, they're right up against it. But even if he'd said, I need to make a hockey move and move out a player or two that are on expiring contracts, I look at their cap situation. They're not going to move out Alex Killorn unless he, because he's an integral part of that team. He's making $4.5 million, and unless he drops off the planet, he's somebody that they need when the playoffs come around. They're not going to move Ian Cole because they need a defensive defenseman to play with somebody like Sergachev or Cernak or even Hedman. And they don't have a lot of depth on defense. So, what are they going to do? Move Brian Elliott's $900,000? That's not going to do anything. They'd have little or no flexibility to do anything. And all the other guys are locked.
That's why I picked them missing the playoffs. I think it's too much for them to overcome this time.
I think that they would have to consider moving Killorn in a trade for a comparable defenseman because I think they know they got a hole. And that it's going to be difficult for them to plug. So if it was a hockey trade, because they've got better offense than they've got defense. So, they could convince themselves or persuade themselves that, perhaps we could still find the goals because, they got some talented guys. Russ just mentioned them, Point, Kucherov, Stamkos. They've got the great Vasilevsky.
Ross Bolton's picked it up.
So they've got a lot.
There was a time in the game, because, the Flyers don't have Couturier, Colton was at 83% in faceoffs. Point was high, 60-something percent. They were killing them down the middle, but everywhere else they were sagging. Yeah, no,
I mean, I watched a lot of that game, and I was really impressed with the workmanlike effort of the Flyers. And like you said, Russ, they're going to get that from a Tortorella team. He's going to get that from them. The problem is. And like I said, at the beginning of the year, I looked at that team. I thought they were short of talent. They didn't have Couturier. Hart, there was questions about whether he was healthy or not. I didn't like where their defense was. I thought bottom five. And I think it's funny because I think the fan base was resigned to the fact that, okay, we're gonna finish in the bottom five. We're gonna have a chance at drafting a Bedard or a Fantilli or a Mishkov. And now they're 3-0, and now they're reacting like, damn it, I want to finish in the bottom five. You're taking us out of a chance to win and to win the lottery here.
Yeah, but they had to know Torts was going to do a little better than that. We said probably like fifth or sixth worst team, and that would take him out of that. The other thing is, though, when John's playing these guys, he doesn't coddle anybody's minutes. So as an example, Joel Farabee, who has come back from the Eichel neck thing, he's playing 20 minutes a game sometimes. Mm-hmm. To me, it's too much. You're in a spot there where you don't know what's going to happen with Joel Farabee in a month if he continues to play 20 minutes. D'Angelo played 24 minutes because he's on the penalty kill. Why is Tony D'Angelo on the penalty kill? Again, these are things that I think John is putting on the team that are working right now that, again, they may not have the horses to keep up this pace and everything else that John's doing for more than a few months. That's why they're going to rotate a lot of guys, young guys in, because he's going to, run them into the ground in essence to get the most out of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Russ's point is very valid. One of the things that happens with Tortorella is he puts players on their best defensive behavior. Everybody is so mindful of their defensive play right now because they're trying to win John over and get more minutes. But that's not who they are. So in about 5 weeks, 6 weeks, they're not going to be able to sustain this because that's not the kind of players they really are. And they'll play a little differently because that's the way they're used to playing. And then there'll be, trouble down the road because, they are short of talented players because of, what happened to Ryan Ellis and Couturier being out, so forth.
Couturier is practicing with the team starting Friday, I thought I heard. So, but that's still, he could still be weeks away, but, that'll help him.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Big time, yeah.
Now, looking at some of the teams that have been a little surprising, Kev, we'll start with the Detroit Red Wings, who are 2-0-1 right now. And I did see Elmer Soderblom score his first NHL goal. And apparently Mickey Redmond has coined the line of Rasmussen, Sundqvist, and Soderblom, who are all rather big players. He calls them the threesome.
The three what? What does he call it?
He calls them the threesome, a threesome, but they're tall streams.
Oh, okay. Now, I've heard the Skyline line.
I heard that as well.
Yeah.
But so far, how has Soderblom impressed you?
Well, they're one of the biggest lines in NHL history. I mean, you got 6'8", 6'6". I mean, Sundqvist at 6'4" is the smallest guy in the line. Although David Perron was pretty funny. He said, "I think we should get the scale out before we say Sundqvist is the smallest guy on the line because he's a little thicker than the skinny boys." But no, they've played well. Soderblom is a real interesting player because he's highly skilled, and one of the issues he may have, which we've all seen. When a big player comes up, fans expect him to be physical. Right. He is a 6'8" guy that plays 6 foot. He's an offensive guy. He wants to, get the puck. He wants to get in front of the net. He's got great hands. He's very good in tight, and so forth. So it's going to be interesting if the fans really, don't get too carried away and expect him to be the kind of player he isn't. But Rasmussen has turned himself. They asked him last year to become Jordan Staal. And you know what? He's trying. He's become a physical force. He gets 3 or 4 hits a game now. He's in the middle of it all. He's got some hands. He can play a little bit. He can be that real valuable third line, 16, 18 goal guy.
Yeah, and you had told me he was in the doghouse for a while with Yzerman.
Yeah, no. Yeah, but they're back. He's back at it, and I think he has accepted his role. They like him. He's worked hard, and they appreciate him. So, that line could be valuable. I wouldn't be shocked though. Soderblom, he's had periods of adjustment every time he's moved up, and it's taken him a while. Like he got 20 goals in the Swedish Hockey League last year, but that was his second or third year in the league. He took some time, and everyone thinks that maybe that too. So would it be shocking if he ends up back in the minors a little bit and have to? No, I probably wouldn't. But we'll see. I mean, they've got, Yzerman has really improved the depth, and they're going to have some decisions to make when everybody gets healthy. Robbie Fabre, who's in their top 6, he's injured out till after January. They'll have to make a decision there. Tyler Bertuzzi isn't playing. Verana has not played because of personal reasons. We don't really know what that's about. Right. So they got 3 of their top 6 out, and they're 2-0-1. And the biggest change is they're better defensively because of Sherratt and Mata and I'm drawing a blank here. Anyway. Sherratt.
Pizik is it Pizik or
Pizik is hurt.
Okay.
It's Robert Hagg. Robert Hagg is stepped in. He's given them a little more physical play. Yeah, and Yzerman made it clear to all the players that he brought in that they wanted safe play, and that's kind of what they've gotten from all 3 of those players. Mata has really been impressive. He came up as an offensive guy. He is now as steady as you can be defensively. And Sherratt has gotten off to a great start. He's become an instant fan favorite, and he's gritty and he plays hard. And Hagg
may be going down like the Anton Stroman route, where he came up as an offensive guy too, and then changed it over.
I think he's realized, Russ, after going to Chicago and then LA, the only way he's going to stay in the league into his 30s is probably to be a more defensively responsible guy. There have been many offensive defensemen who have become that in their later years. Okay, just 2 teams in the West before we end the show that I don't think they're surprising. I mean, because I thought Dallas was going to be a playoff team, but Dallas has started 3-0. Russ, you know my feelings on Mason Marchment, and by the way, Dennis Malgin is going to be a healthy scratch tomorrow when Dallas plays Toronto, and it'll be the Nick Robertson versus Jason Robertson show at Scotiabank Arena. But Mason Marchment has really made it. Tony Soprano in the chats to talk about Mason Marchment. Well, Mason Marchment, I loved the signing. He was a player that I think Florida, if they had unlimited cap space, would have signed, but they couldn't. And Dallas was the beneficiary. And obviously, I think he's motivated this year because his dad passed away, and I think he's really I think he'd be motivated anyway. But I think to honor his dad, and I've heard him talk about just wanting to really establish himself. and he's a good kid and a good player, and they're playing him with Tyler Seguin, Russ, and that's he could score 20, 25 goals if he stays healthy.
Yeah, no question. I mean, if you're playing with Seguin, it's gonna elevate your game because Seguin can still play. So that's a big deal. Ottinger's a big deal. Look, and Robertson is I would say a top 25 player in the league. I think he'll get somewhere close.
He's
to
their
that.
guy in Dallas now.
Yeah, so I think he'll get close to that 40 again. So, yeah, I mean, I still think they're going to have to tweak their defense again. I know you guys like it a little better than I do, but I still think they're going to have to at the deadline.
Well, I mean, okay, they can add a veteran here or there, but I mean, honestly, if my defense is Heiskanen, Lindell, Suter, I mean, I like Hakanpää as a 5 and 6. He's a big, tough Finn. Now you like Lundqvist, and he's a young guy. He's gonna make his.
He's doing well. He's running the second power play. That's good.
Can you improve over Colin Miller and Thomas Harley and Joel Hanley? Yeah, you can. Yeah. But Kev, I look at that team, and they've got a number one goaltender, a young, good number one goaltender in Ottinger. They got one of the best defensemen in the NHL in Heiskanen. They have one of the best wingers in the NHL in Jason Robertson. They've got veteran guys like Sagan and Pavelski. I mean, they had something at the deadline if they can, and they Hintz and other. But they're a dark horse in the West.
Well, yeah, I mean, just think when they got in the final. Nobody saw that coming, and they got there and. They're a better team now. Their goaltending is better. I think you have a mature Robertson who's, taken over as the go-to guy. And, I know a lot of people want to lump Sagan and Ben together. I don't do that. I think Ben's game has fallen off. Sagan was still productive last year. He had more than 50 points. And he can get more points this year because I think he's, even more recovered from his injury. So, I like this team. I think the team looks good. I think their defense, while not perfect, is better than – I think it's better than average. That's what I would say about their defense.
And the other team that's undefeated in the West is Calgary. I think we all thought Calgary would be a playoff team, but they're 3-0, and they've started off 3-0 against Colorado, Edmonton, and Vegas. And
I picked them for the President's Trophy. I did.
And to me, that's the most impressive thing, Kev. It's like, okay, maybe Vegas, after missing the playoffs last year, you can't put them in the upper echelon of the West. But you're talking about the two teams that made the conference final in Colorado and Edmonton, and they beat them. They beat both of them. It's 3 out of 82, but I think it's a good first start, especially for a team that had so many big changes in the offseason.
Well, they've just been impressive. Not only did they win, but they've been impressive wins. And if you watch that team, you realize Tree Living just did a tremendous job. I mean, you lose Gaudreau and Tkachuk, and somehow you find a way to have a team that looks just as strong. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But you can't underestimate the impact of Sutter. He's been around the block a lot. He knows how it all works. He knows, what works and what doesn't. Even though he is an old school coach, he's won in the modern era. So you can't just say he, does everything old school way. He doesn't.
Yeah, he did say something funny yesterday too. I guess pregame before Vegas, they asked him about something and how good Vegas is, and he goes, "Well, with the addition of Jake Lecision, now they have like 4 Western Canadian players, so that makes them good."
Yeah, he would say something like that. But like Sutter does things like, with the power play, he'll go into a room and say, "Look, you guys are all skilled players. Figure it out."
Right.
Like that wasn't my game. I can't tell you how to get the puck into that. You know how to do that.
Right.
But really, sort of tries to empower them. But he's insists upon everybody, playing hard, and that's the key to the Calgary Flames. They're really hard to play against. We all know that. They should be able to sustain this.
Yeah, the only thing I could see them, and two things. Daryl Sutter, as a motivational tool, played Daniel Vladar against Edmonton instead of Markstrom. And apparently Markstrom was a little pissed off because he wanted to play against Edmonton because of what happened last year in the playoffs. You can't tell me that wasn't a little bit of motivation there by Daryl Sutter,
Sure.
like down the line, okay, you can play him, but we're not going to give you that right away. The other thing is their defense. I think their defense is solid. It's not spectacular. That might be an area where they, because they got Uyghur, Hanifin, Anderson, Tanev, Zadorov, not bad. Michael Stone is their number 6. That probably could be that's an area like Dallas, Russ, where I think they probably add a body at the deadline, depending on how much it costs.
Yeah, they're going to add a body, but they'll, again, they don't have a lot to add. They don't have a big need. It's going to probably be whatever part of their lineup is injury weakened. That's what they'll add.
Right. All right. Great show. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast for Kevin Allen and Russ Cohen. I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Go Yankees.